It's Craig Syracusa, Walk in Faith. I'm excited to be sitting down with my friend Ron Hall. Ron, you and I met, it was about 3 years ago. I was covering the junket in LA for your film, same kind of difference as me, starring Renee Zellweger. And you and I had a wonderful conversation, which I still think about now. And I just want to thank you for, just continuing to build that relationship with you. How are you doing, Ron?
Oh, I'm doing great. I just celebrated my 75th birthday, and I'm feeling great. I'm energized. God continues to bless me, and I have a beautiful wife and a new life. So I'm as happy as I can be. So
Happy birthday. I didn't want to tell anyone your age. I wasn't sure if you were going to, what age you were going by, but happy birthday. God bless you. It was your birthday. Was it Sunday or Saturday? It was just this weekend, right?
yeah, it was Saturday. But Craig, I love to live in the truth, and so even though I would prefer having a few years earlier, I have to live in what God gave me, and I believe that He's going to bless me, and I'm going to be around here for a lot longer. So,
God bless you. God bless you. So, I reached out to you. So I was on Facebook. I don't know, we're friends on Facebook, and I saw that you were doing a podcast, and I said, that's interesting. So I said, I got to reach out to Ron. And then I saw you had some guests that I was friends with. Like I mentioned to you, Demos is a friend of mine, interviewed him last year. But, in case people aren't familiar with your show, and I'm going to take this right off of your page. It says, I think it was actually one of your podcasts. You said, I know people are asking, who the heck is Ron Hall? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Well, I've had a very interesting journey in life. I grew up on a ranch. My grandfather was a cowboy, and I grew up as a cowboy. Then when it was time to go to school, I had to move into the city. Well, ranching didn't pay a lot, so we moved into a very poverty-stricken, very, very poor home in the city of Fort Worth, where I went to school. I graduated from high school, was one of the first in my family to actually attend and graduate from college. I got an MBA from TCU. I went in the securities business to become a municipal bond trader and an underwriter of bonds and stocks. And along the way, I happened into an art museum in Houston, Texas, like the first week of my job as a bond trader. And I'd never taken an art course or anything else. And so all of a sudden, I walked in a museum and I thought, wow, I love these kind of things. I wish I'd taken an art course in college.
Wow.
And so I decided that I would become an art dealer. I loved art so much. So I taught myself to be an art dealer, and all along for the 4 years that I was a bond trader. And when I started making more money as an art dealer in 1975, I left bond trading and went into full-time art dealing. And I've done that now since full-time since 1975. I started that in 71. And then, of course, I was married, raised 2 children, and and then, of course, the story, what people, I guess, know me for is here is the poster of our film here behind me and my portrait of my friend on my other side. But in 1998, my late wife, Debbie, had a literal dream of a homeless man who would change our lives in our city. And so she asked me to go with her into the inner city of Fort Worth, Texas, in search of this man of her dreams. And
wow.
So anyway, that's really, I guess, why I'm on your show today, is because of the movie, the book, which I wrote that became a #1 New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, and I covered the book, read the book, covered the film, and you mentioned just briefly about, it was Denver, right? And his name, Denver, I think, yes. Was it Suicide or was
Suicide was what he was known as on the street.
Suicide.
No one knew his real name.
And what's interesting too is that, a man of God, I don't believe in coincidences, right? God ordained moments in a sense, right? So you met Denver, in the film, you didn't want to be there. I know maybe you felt uncomfortable. You met him, and that one relationship changed the course of your life. It completely transformed and changed your life. I mean, what would you say to someone out there that believes in coincidences? You could honestly say that wasn't a coincidence, right?
Well, my friend Denver, who had never been to school a day in his life, he was a black man, obviously of a different race than I am. He had been grown up on a plantation in Louisiana. And when I met him, he was living in a dumpster in the inner city of Fort Worth. He'd been homeless for more than 20 years. But he was the wisest man I've ever known. And he told me that a coincidence, he said, Mr. Ron, Did you know that a coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous?
Mm.
So I know without a doubt that God was in this whole story. This is a God story because this is not a story that I wanted to live. It's a story that I ran from, but it's a story that God kept drawing me into through the wisdom and through the friendship that I developed with a man known on the streets as Suicide that had threatened to kill everybody on the streets, and everyone lived in fear of him. Some people called him the Lion of the Jungle.
Wow.
But yes, I say that the moment that we connected as friends, God chose to repaint, as an art dealer, to repaint the portrait of my life. And so it was my whole story changed. I say that I would, even if I believe as an art dealer, if I had sold the Mona Lisa to the Pope and made world headlines, I'm still going to be known as the friend of Denver Moore, a homeless ex-con killer that became my best friend.
It's amazing. And like you said, too, I think it's until you're able, or until you can look back and see how God was sort of evident along the whole journey. There are people that do believe in coincidence, but like you said, and like Denver said, it's just God's way of remaining anonymous. Now, you are extremely busy. I understand COVID and all that, but you know, I mean, I saw the video. You've been dancing in Cabo. I know you make that joke a lot. So you've been dancing. You got, you know, writing books, all this stuff. So why did you decide, you know what, I'm going to go into the podcast. I'm going to start interviewing people. How did that sort of transpire?
Well, I was not actually looking for anything to do, but I normally have about 20 speaking events a year, which usually translates to about, 2 a month. And in the busier months, not many in the summer, but, in the spring, there's usually 3 or 4 or 5 a month. And all of a sudden I wake up the 1st of March and everything is canceled.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I depend on my income. And so I started, doing some more writing and just looking, how long is this going to last? And am I going to be able to rebook these podcasts? And I get a call one day from a podcast producer named Wendy Stevens in Florida. And she said, I follow you on LinkedIn. I know who you are. I know what you do. You have a regional presence, but you have a worldwide brand because you've been a #1 New York Times bestseller. You stayed on the best-selling list for 3.5 years. You have a film that you wrote and produced that's, starring all Academy Award-winning actors. And she said, you're just not making the most of your story and what you do. And so if you really are serious about helping people and making a difference, which you say in a lot of your speeches, then you should have a podcast and get people to follow you and see if you can make a difference and continue to make a difference while you're being silenced by COVID. And so I said, well, I don't know anything about it, so I'll get a microphone and I'll open up my computer. And so she talked me into it. And so now I've done about 30 interviews. So
yeah, no, I've listened to it today. I listened to a few the other day, Michael Casey, Demas. So what would you say the core message behind the podcast? Like, what are you trying to reach? Like, who are you trying to reach and why are you trying to reach?
Well, when you listen to my podcast, Craig, I always open up saying, this is, I want to welcome you to the show where we share the meaningful that makes life beautiful. And I want to focus on people that are doing good and meaningful things and wonderful things that are being game changers and life changers and people that are impacting our society for the good. We just hear so much bad going on and people want to focus, news wants to focus on bad things, whereas there are a lot of people like you and me, we're doing good things to make a difference in the world. And I just want to focus on those people that have an interesting story and interesting lives that are not getting any coverage. I mean, the one person I would have to say that I interviewed that gets plenty of coverage was Catherine Schwarzenegger, which was my first interview. Now, being the daughter of the governor and the daughter of Maria Shriver, I mean, she's all over and has millions of followers. But she happens to be a friend, and she wrote a new book called The Gift of Forgiveness. And in that, she contacted me and she said, you have a beautiful story of forgiveness because your late wife had to forgive you for an affair. And I want to know what that was like to be forgiven, because the rest of my stories are about people that are having to forgive somebody else. But this one story that I want to put in the book is about you and your story and how it felt to be forgiven for an affair with Christ-like forgiveness. So, but that interview is one that really kind of launched me. But so many other people are doing as great of things, but are not getting any publicity. And I just want to feature their stories. So,
I totally agree with you. I mean, that was my next question. You answered it. I mean, what sort of interview stands out? But you were right. I mean, there's a lot of great stories, but there aren't enough platforms. You don't get enough coverage. And one thing that I noticed too, and I hope this doesn't happen to you, but as we start to tell these stories, especially if you talk about faith in God, I've noticed a lot of people, you get these really negative responses, as they call them, trolls, and you get people coming after you. And I can see why, men of faith like us say, you know what, it's not worth it. I'd rather somebody else do it. But it's unfortunate that when we want to make a difference and tell a story, all of a sudden you get so many people that criticize you.
Yes, and I can't figure that out. But
I can't either. I can't figure it either. You know how many people, Ron, I have so many subscribers that will subscribe, will watch my videos, and then write long messages about your God. It's like, why would you take the time to do that? I don't understand. But you and I, we're going to continue to do it because we have a mission.
Well, and I'm trying not to be political or overtly religious or Christian in what I'm doing. I'm just trying to focus on people that are living a life that is worthy of examining and seeing that people are doing great things out there and making a difference. But people always find some way. There are some people that just live in negativity, and they don't, I guess, I feel sorry for them because there's nothing that I can do to help them except to pray for them. But my friend Denver, when people used to criticize us as well, thinking that I was doing this just to make money, being friends with a homeless ex-con killer who was schizophrenic, bipolar, addict, and all these things, who threatened to kill me twice. And I asked him to move in my home for an experiment in life because I believe I'd heard from God to do that. And he lived with me for 12 years. And I ended up writing another book, not only Same Kind of Different as Me, but Working Our Way Home, which is the news story. But people find a way to criticize me about that, about how I was patronizing to him and making him be my slave and all these kind of things. He never had to do one thing. I made him a millionaire by writing the book and giving him the royalties, half the royalties, and giving mine to the poor and the homeless. And people still find a way to become critical. I don't understand it. But
I don't either.
I don't understand how people can go up in the name of their God or their company, their club or their ministry or whatever else, their cause, and just destroy a city, break out glass, steal things in the name of their cause. That makes no difference. Why would you want to support a cause like that? That makes you want to turn against a cause like that.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And, you've, like you said earlier, you had so many great, interviews. Demas, like I mentioned before, fantastic. After, each episode, do you sit and reflect the same way you did with the one you mentioned? Do you ever sit and reflect and say, why did God give me this opportunity? Or what did I learn from this opportunity or from this interview? Do you ever do that after each episode?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. And I learn a lot from my episodes because, people like Demas, of course, a disclaimer is that Demas, I've interviewed him twice, but he and I are actually, we are working together and producing films, especially this film on Chicago. And we want to make a difference in Chicago, where these young men are killing each other, and where, Black Lives Matter doesn't want to go in there and do anything about all these young Black men killing each other in there. More people have died there in that area of Chicago than the Iraq and wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But, this is what drives me crazy, is that, we have to go into Chicago to try to make a difference and bring the gospel and bring, hope to these kids, where there's millions of people there in the town that just want to ignore them and just let them go on killing at each other. We want to stop the violence. We want to make a difference there. So,
what was the experience like for you when you were in Chicago?
Oh, well, my wife, the first day I took my wife there, I mean, she says, "What are we doing here? This is so frightening," because we were walking down the streets in the worst part of Chicago, and these 14, 15-year-old boys are walking around with pistols in their pants, and they're sticking out of their pockets and pants and looking at us like they're going to kill us.
Wow.
And people are asking us down there, "What are you guys doing down here?" "Well, we're trying to make a difference." "Well, some of them, we don't want you down here making a difference, So but it was scary. But within 30 minutes after my wife asked me why we were here, a young girl walked up to her and just was crying and said, "Can you help me get out of here?" She said, and she was pushing a brand new baby in a stroller. And she was looked like 16, 17 years old. And she said, "I have to get out of here, but I don't know a way out." She said, "My baby daddy shot me in the stomach when he found out I was pregnant. He said he missed the baby, but I lost, a lot of my intestines and things like that. The baby lived and was born, so here she had the baby with her." And she said, "But now I'm afraid. I want to get out of Chicago. I don't know how to get out of here." So we took her to a church and a youth center for the pastor to help her get out of there. But that's the reason we were there, if no other reason, just to help and meet with that young girl. But it's a scary thing. We were trying to offer young men a hope, to get them out of the neighborhood, to put them in either another neighborhood in Chicago within a church where they could be mentored and could be given an opportunity for a new life and an education. And we didn't find one that was willing to leave the neighborhood.
Wow. Oh my God. Wow. You're doing God's work. What you've been doing for the past, 20 years, it's beautiful. It's really God's work. One thing I've noticed, I've done, I don't know how many interviews during COVID, and I've noticed that a lot has been exposed, right, during COVID, right? And the one thing is that within ourselves, it gave us the opportunity to sort of reevaluate what our purpose is. Why are we all here? So some of the things I've noticed too is like people are starting to question, like, what is God calling me to do? What is my purpose? Do I need to serve a higher power? What would you say to people, or what have you experienced during COVID? Has it exposed anything within your own life?
Well, first of all, I have to say that in COVID, I was able to spend some very long quality times with my new wife. And so that was, we ate 3 meals a day together. Mm-hmm. We were constantly together. I did miss being with my grandchildren and my children, but other than just the horrible effect that it had on business, the horrible effect that it had on families who lost people from COVID, I can't criticize or fault COVID itself. It's a disease. It's a virus that, and I say that some people say, why did God allow that to happen? Well, God is in the business of I guess we suffer a lot of the consequences of our own mistakes. And I don't think God inflicted any disease on us to try to population control or destroy or get his attention. Sometimes my friend Denver used to tell me, "Mr. Ron, if the devil ain't messing with you, he's already got you." Yeah. So this is an evil virus, I think, that came from an enemy. And also, back to the point of all these people that criticize what we do. My friend Denver also told me, he said, "Mr. Ron, them people is full of hell. And sometimes you just got to bless the hell out of people." So
I heard you say that on one of the interviews. No, you're definitely right. But what I noticed too during COVID was there was such first couple of weeks, there was so many people that wanted to talk about faith and ask questions about God. And I was really, I loved it. And then the transition started, and then, all hell sort of broke loose, especially in the New York area and Texas. So life has sort of shifted a little bit. One of the things you mentioned too in one of the interviews was, I don't know what Ponzi scheme it was. I have an idea, but I'm not going to ask. But a lot of people now, are going through a lot of similar problems whether they lost their job, they lost their business, their 401k, everything is sort of up in the air. Like you said, you lost, speaking engagements. What did you do to overcome that adversity? Did you lean on your faith? How did you overcome that?
Well, after I got over the shock and the thoughts, I never actually thought of committing suicide, but, I went from being a wealthy person to nothing. And I can remember the day that I found out that I had become worthless in the financial thing. My friend Denver and I were living together. And so he walked in and he saw me kind of in shock and crying. And he said, "What's up?" And I said, "Denver, I just found out I've lost everything. Everything, my whole future, all the money I've earned in my life is gone." And I said, "I've hit rock bottom." And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Ron, do you know that rock bottom is a solid foundation to build on? Mm. And so, he encouraged me and he said, "Mr. Ron, if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have nothing. So what I'm going to tell you is everything I got is yours. And you can have it all." I said, "Well, no, Denver, I don't want it to be that way." He said, "I got plenty of money." I said, "I know you do." He said, "So you can have it all." I said, "No, Denver, I don't want it, because I know that God will continue to bless me if I'm just continue to be faithful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start all over and dig myself out of this hole." So that's, I just kept a positive attitude about it. Not that I wasn't upset, and not that I wasn't angry, and not that I didn't delight in seeing the man that stole all the money being handcuffed on the streets of New York City and hauled off to jail. But, a lot of people got hurt worse than I did. I wasn't an enormously wealthy person, but I had enough to live on the rest of my life and not have to worry about. But, all of a sudden when you're, in your early 60s and you think you're set for life, and then you wake up one day and it's all gone, it's a shock. So, but, I have found that rock bottom is a solid foundation, and I've been able to make a comeback to a level where I can live comfortably now. So.
And you said something important. You said you never lost faith. And that's something that we all need to remind ourselves that, we, no matter what happens, we can't sort of question and get, we can be upset, but we can't, say to God, like, why did you allow this to happen? That's part of the storm, part of the journey. If we remain in faith and we know that God has us in the palm of his hand, we'll be able to overcome any adversity. One of the questions I love, and I never asked this question before because I don't know, it just never came up, but what's on Ron Hall's bucket list? That's your favorite question to ask the guests. So what's on your bucket list?
Well, my bucket list really is, I do want to be able, I've been married now 9 years. I was a widower. My wife, Debbie, died in 2000. And then Denver moved in with me. I spent 10 or 12 years raising Denver as when you move a 64-year-old man into your house and expect him to behave. I spent 14 years raising Denver. So I want to, with my new wife, I want to take her on some of the extraordinary places. I'd like to, go on a sailboat trip in the Caribbean, maybe the British Virgin Islands, maybe spend 2 or 3 months living on a beautiful island and being able to write and just, feel relaxed without having any pressure. I've not been able to do that because of the lack of funds and trying to dig myself out of the hole. But my bucket list is to do that. I do want to. I'm working with William Morris Agency in New York to produce a Broadway play on our Same Kind of Different As Me story, and to combine actually both stories, the Same Kind of Different As Me and What Difference Do It Make, to the whole story of my friendship with Denver. And it's a very timely piece. So that's one of the top things on my bucket list, is to get that done. But
what would you say you miss most about Denver?
Well, I say that I miss him like a one-legged cowboy would miss a pair of boots. So every day I think of Denver. He was such a part of my life. He was the first face I saw every morning, the last face I saw every night for more than 12 years. It's his wisdom just is, I have to say though, I do enjoy my new wife, a 6-foot redhead, a lot more than I did him, but he sure made life interesting. And but it's just, he became a part of my life. He was closer than a brother, and he taught me. He was really my mentor, even though you can say, how can a homeless man who's never been to school a day in his life, who had been 10 years in prison, who had killed people, how can he become a mentor? But he was a spiritual being that God used to transform cities and lives all across America. And God saved him for that purpose.
Wow. It's beautiful. Ron, so where could people find the Ron Hall podcast? Where could they find the show? Is it on iTunes? Can you tell us some of the platforms?
I think it should be on everything. I think just when I watch it, I just go to Google theronhallshow.com, and it comes up somewhere. I don't know where it comes up. What do I know about podcasting? I just enjoy talking to friends and sharing their stories and hoping people enjoy those as well. But
well, I enjoyed the show, and I will advise people to Google the Ron Hall. I actually listed on iTunes, and then I went on. There's a website where you can subscribe, which I did. Ron, it's a pleasure, and thank you. Just thank you for being a friend, and I really appreciate what you're doing in interviewing all these wonderful guests. And I hope I get to see you soon. Hopefully, COVID ends, and we're able to sort of be together in a room. I really do.
Oh yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to that. I don't like the new normal. I want to go back to the old normal. So.
The good old days. I'm writing a book now, which I'm plugging myself, and I talk about the good old days. And my parents, my father's about the same age as you, and he always spoke about the good old days. And I couldn't sort of relate to the good old days, but now I actually can tell my son when he gets older that we were living in the good old days.
Oh yeah. What was that song? Those were the days, my friend, I thought they'd never end. You can dance forever and a day. Yeah.
Oh, Ron's going to start dancing like it was Cabo.
Well, I have to give a plug for my my new wife, Elizabeth. Her name is Beth. She was, as a child, from Charleston, South Carolina, and she was the state clogging champion. So if anybody doesn't know what clogging is, just Google clogging, and it's a Southern kind of dance, like the river dancers, but you use your arms. And so the day that we got the message, we were in Cabo for the July the 4th, that Charlie Daniels had died. And she had clogged thousands of times to a Charlie Daniels song, The Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And so in his honor, we did a clogging. So she was trying to teach me how to clog on that Facebook thing. I got a lot of comments on that because I'm not a clogger, and that was my first attempt at clogging.
Yeah, I think that could go viral, or as my son would say, it'll go virus.
Yeah.
Ron, it's a pleasure. Listen, if there's anything I could do to help you, please let me know. And guys, I advise you to watch or listen to the Ron Hall podcast. And I just want to repeat one thing before we go. I love that he says, for great museum mansions and West Texas ranches to stinking inner city dumpsters and hobo jungles. I love that. That's in the description of his show. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And always remember, you have the ability to inspire and evangelize through your words and actions. God bless you, Ron.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Talk soon.